Good morning, and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim, as we continue reading Flying Against Time by Franklin W. Dixon. This is Chapter 6. What made that brick fall from the scaffold? Or had it fallen? Had it not been thrown or dropped by human hands? These were the questions that were perturbing Ted Scott's mind as he stood listening in the partly constructed building. But they were questions to which nothing he could see or hear gave any answer. He went to the rear of the building and peered about with the aid of a flashlight. Its side bordered an alley that ran through from one street to another. Had anyone been on that scaffold, he might have clambered down and made his way to the back street and thus escaped detection. Yet it seemed almost incredible to Ted that such scrambling would not have been heard by him. The night was quiet, and every sound carried a long distance. He went through to the back street, with the thought that someone might be lurking in the shadows there, waiting to see the result of their attempt, if indeed it had been a deliberate attempt. His foot jarred against something light that yielded to his push and slid several feet away. He stooped and picked it up, examining it with the aid of his flashlight. It was a package of cigarettes of an imported British brand, quite celebrated and rather expensive. About 2/3 of the usual number of cigarettes remained in the package. It looked to Ted as though the package might have been dropped from the pocket of someone fleeing in haste, whose coat had knocked against and been momentarily held by some obstruction. There was nothing about it that differed from probably a million other packages of the same brand, but Ted slipped it into his pocket on the mere chance that it might sometime be found useful. He looked carefully for any slip of paper that might have been pulled at the same time from the owner's pocket, but his search was fruitless, and at length he returned to the other street and resumed his journey to Bromville House. He said nothing about the matter to Eben and Charity, but it was a very sober and thoughtful Ted Scott who tossed upon his pillows that long night before sleep came to him. The next morning he dropped into a tobacco store kept by a friend of his. "Hello, Sam," he greeted the owner. "How are you, Ted?" replied Bill. "What in thunder brought you into this store?" he demanded. "Is it possible that you've taken up smoking?" "Not yet," replied Ted. "I dropped in for a moment because I wanted to ask you a question." "All right, out with it." Ted pulled the package of cigarettes out of his pocket and laid it on the counter. "Do you keep this brand in stock?" he asked. Sam glanced at the brand. "No," he said, "it's too fancy for the general run of my customers. It costs twice as much as the ordinary kind." "Ever had any inquiries for it?" continued Ted anxiously. "Oh, once in a dog's age," replied Sam. "Once in a while a traveling man gets loose with his firm's money and spreads himself, but it's a month since I've had anyone ask for it. Why the sudden interest in the vile weed?" "Oh, just a matter of a little personal interest," evaded Ted. "Do any of the other tobacco stores in town carry this special brand?" "I don't think so," replied Sam, "but it wouldn't do any harm to ask." Ted made the rounds, but with no success. Bromville stuck to the ordinary brands. When he saw Walter Hapworth that day, he told him of the occurrence of the night before. The latter looked very grave. "Beginning already, are they?" he said. "Do be careful, Ted. Keep off the streets at night, or, if you have to go out, have somebody with you." "Of course, this might have been an accident," suggested Ted. "Accident nothing," snorted Walter. "Of course, a brick may have fallen from a building, if it's left teetering on the edge of the scaffold by a careless workman. I suppose it has happened sometimes, but that it should fall at the very instant that you're passing beneath it is stretching the long arm of coincidence too far. No, take my word for it, that brick was either dropped or thrown. Did you say that you have no clue at all who did it?" "Not unless you call this a clue," replied Ted, throwing the package of cigarettes on the desk. Walter Hapworth examined it carefully. "Finest brand that's made," he commented. "I don't suppose there's any place in town you could get it except at the Hotel Excelsior." Ted sat up in his chair with a jerk. "Do they sell it?" he asked. "Sure thing," was the reply. "You know their patrons want the best, regardless of expense." "The Hotel Excelsior," Ted repeated. "And that hotel is kept by Brewster Gale." There was a moment's silence while Ted and Walter Hapworth looked hard and long at each other. "Of course Greg and Duck get the best their father has in stock," remarked Ted. "Sure thing. Nothing is too good for Papa's darlings. Ted, I believe you've hit the nail on the head. That package of cigarettes belongs to either Greg or Duck Gale, and was lost as one or the other or both were hurrying away from the place." "It looks possible," said Ted thoughtfully. "Of course, nobody else living at the hotel could have done it." "Utterly out of the question, Ted. Those fellows are out to get you." "Well, they didn't get me," said Ted Scott with a wry smile. "They have terribly hard luck with their schemes." "Their luck may turn suddenly," warned Hapworth. "Don't you relax one jot of vigilance, old boy." "I won't," promised Ted. "After this, when I'm passing a new building, it's me for the middle of the street." "They won't repeat," said Hapworth. "The next attack will come in a different form. I wish I'd never got you into this contest." "Oh, forget it," said Ted. "I got into it myself." "Put your troubles in your old kit bag, Walter, and smile, smile, smile. All these fellows' bullets have proved blank cartridges so far, and I have a hunch that that's all they'll ever amount to." "I wish I were so optimistic," replied Walter Hapworth. The next week was an extremely busy one, and a delightful one for Ted Scott, as he saw his new plane taking form. He was getting the fullest cooperation from every one of the workers, and he could see already that the new machine would exceed in buoyancy, speed, and stability any that he had ever before possessed. Only one diversion did he permit himself. Every day after the noon meal he took the Browning up for a spin. The elation he felt when once in the air seemed to clear the cobwebs from his brain, and after he reached the ground again he pitched into his work with renewed energy. One day after dinner he returned to the works and spent half an hour on a special bit of planning that deferred his aerial trip until a little later than usual. The day had been very warm, and he had carried his coat over his arm on his return from the Bromville house to the aeroplant. He hung this on a nail in the hangar in which the Browning was stored, and went into the main building. When he emerged, Jackson, his mechanic, was filling the tanks of the Browning with gasoline. "Anyone been around, Jackson?" asked Ted, for the interest aroused by the coming contest brought many curious ones to the flying field, who hung around chiefly on the chance of getting a glimpse of Ted. "Not so many," replied Jackson as he closed the tank. "Mostly town people, including those pesky Gale brats. Pity those loafers can't find something to do except breathe." "Keep your eyes on those fellows, Jackson," warned Ted, "and if they give you the least excuse for doing it, order them off the field." "I'll do that," promised Jackson. "It gives me the willies just to look at their ugly mugs. Whoever let those fellows out of prison made a big mistake." "I think so myself," observed Ted, as he drew on his coat and took a stick of gum from his pocket and bit off a piece. "Well, I'm off now, Jackson. Be back in an hour or less. Knock away those blocks and give the propeller a whirl, will you?" Jackson complied. The Browning roared down the runway and soared into the air like a bird. "Good old girl," murmured Ted, caressing his plane. "I hate like the mischief to leave you behind when I start on that coast-to-coast trip. I sure would like to have you hear the roaring of the waves of the Pacific. But I've got to have speed, old girl, speed to burn. And when it comes to a possible 200 miles an hour, you don't quite make the grade." The machine worked to a charm, obeying the slightest movement of the controls. The weather was fine, and there was no reason apparent why Ted Scott should not enjoy the airing as much as he had expected to. As a matter of fact, he did for the first 10 minutes. Then gradually he felt a strange sort of lethargy gaining on him. He found himself acting mechanically. His hands were sluggish as they manipulated the stick. There was a ringing in his ears. "What's the matter with me?" he asked himself impatiently. "Could I have eaten anything at dinner that disagreed with me?" He tried to shake off the feeling, but it persisted. A dull ache was invading his head. His eyes were swimming. The landmarks below, that a few minutes before had been perfectly plain, now seemed zigzagging and distorted. A bit alarmed, he turned the nose of his plane toward home. It was high time that he did so, for his head was reeling, and the faintness was becoming more pronounced. "Strange," he muttered thickly. "I've never felt this way before." But hadn't he? Yes, just once. The memory came back to him of the time he had been doped when his plane had been robbed. Doped? Sinister word. Was he doped now? Startled now, he made a great effort to give the Browning all the gas it could use and speed for the home flying field. He fought desperately against the lethargy that was invading him. He must keep his senses. Through a thick haze he saw the aeroplant beneath him. He made a quick descent. It was far from the graceful swan-like landing that was characteristic of his work. The plane struck the ground with a heavy jar, ran along unsteadily a few hundred feet, and stopped. But just when it stopped, Ted did not know. He was passed out at the controls. And that's the end of Chapter 6. We'll continue next week with Chapter 7, Villainy. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.